on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. This week, we are here with the continuation of our Battle for Zendikar / Oath of the Gatewatch story reviews with story number 16, Revelation at the Eye by Kelly Diggs. My quick review at the top is, this one's amazing.
good.
Super good. If you are familiar with how the Oath of the Gatewatch story ends, even broadly, this is great. If you're not, it's still great. It's like, if you've read other stories with these characters and this storyline in it, this is a really good one. Even if you've read this one previously, it's a good one to return to because of the Easter eggs and etc. in it. What about you? What were your thoughts?
Great writing. I feel like this is kind of like the catalyst almost of like the rest of the story.
Sure.
So, really good.
Yeah, really good.
Definitely read this one.
Yeah. And so the reason we say that is because, as we typically tend to do here on the show, even though this is a bit of a flashback review series for this set of stories, we're still trying to do a lot more reviewing than summarizing. And so we give you the opportunity. In fact, the first link down in the description will be to this story. So we encourage you to go read it in your own time. It's definitely worth your time, as we have said, in our opinions, of course. We think it's worth your time. Go read it, and then we would love it if you would come back here and join in on that discussion down in the comments below, as always. But, on to the full review itself. I found it interesting. This story kind of starts with Jace, like, climbing a mountain or a cliff face or whatever, and then he gets to the top, he's exhausted, and he runs into an Eldrazi. And he makes an illusion, and that doesn't work, and then he tries to read its mind, and that doesn't work. It's like, how did he even make it this far in the first place? Yeah. Like, I felt like this was a long time since he was with Jorian, which was the last time that we saw him in the story. And I guess it's hard for me to imagine that he hadn't run into a single Eldrazi between then and now climbing to the top of this mountain face. So that was odd to me.
Yeah.
And also, now that, like, I mean, I guess now he gets to the eye in this story, and Zada helps him. But if Zada didn't help him, he could be dead.
Right. Which
is very stupid. I mean, maybe he would have planeswalked away in time, maybe. But then how would he get back? And also, like, it just seems so odd that, like, he's on his own, and he's like, yeah, I got this, no big deal. And then the one little piddly Eldrazi that he comes across.
People who actually live on this plane, like, are from here, and are actually, like, way more badass than you in a physical manner. Like, they can't even handle this.
Yeah. So I was like a little surprised. Maybe that's just a yada yada. Like, he had to get there, so it's tough for him.
Like a way for him to like realize that like, just because he's this powerful planeswalker with all this magic that he can do, doesn't mean that that magic works against every enemy. That he comes up against.
Yeah.
It's mindless glutton drones don't care about your illusory whatever.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't.
Yeah. And I think, it was then, once he met Zada, there was a much more jovial tone to the story for that section.
Yeah.
Zada was hilarious. One of the lines that we wrote, talking about when they get to the eye, I'm skipping a portion, we'll get back to that. But when they get to the eye...
Well, I love when she was like, I ate him.
About Tuk Tuk.
And we were like, what?
You did what now? And not only that, but it's rocks? Like, you ate rocks? That's... So, Jace was confused too, and he went from like, oh my god, cannibalism to, okay, now it's just impossible. And Zada's like, no, look, I have this pestle and mortar, and I ground it up, and, we eat rocks. It's what we do. Sure.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And he described her pitted teeth, and it's like, I don't don't think she would have teeth at the end of all that.
They too would be ground down.
Yeah.
But she says at one point,
might as well just pluck the teeth out and put them right in the pestle.
Yeah.
And mortar.
Yeah. She gets to the eye with Jace, and Jace is like, "Aren't you going to come in?" And she says, "Nobody goes in there. Bad magic. Certain death. Good luck." Amazing. So funny. And again, I did somewhat of a poor job of getting the comedic timing right there, even though I'd like to think I did a relatively okay job reading it. But you can hear that comedic timing during a movie or a TV show or whatever, of just like, you know, that step-by-step sentence, and then the good luck, and like a smile and whatever, and then she runs away, and
I'm not helping. I'm pissed.
yeah, it was super great. But I will say, and something that you wanted to talk about, that doesn't mean, just because Zada was somewhat of a comic relief character in this one, doesn't mean that she didn't have moments of depth as well. When she mentions, you know, Jace says, "Well, I'm going to the Eye of Ugin. It's the center of the Hedron network." And Zada says, "Well, it was," and I quoted here for you and in general, "A scrambled mess doesn't have a center."
Yeah. I loved that line. I feel like you talked about Easter eggs before. This whole story, like, we have the benefit of seeing it, you know, we're looking back.
Yes.
We're going back to what happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have the benefit of knowing what happens afterwards. And we kind of know that the theme of a lot of these stories is like Jace overcoming the abuse and manipulation from Liliana and Alhamaret. Am I saying his name?
Yeah, Alhamaret, that's either way.
And like regaining his memories and becoming the person that he's meant to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are Easter eggs in this story that lead to like more immediate parts of what's coming up, and there's Easter eggs in this story that lead to less immediate parts of this story that are coming up.
Yeah.
And this is one of them for me, because it's like, you know, he says, "Well, I need this goblin," and he finds a goblin. "I need this goblin to help me," and he finds a goblin, and then finds out that that goblin ate the goblin he needs.
So weird.
And this goblin, even though she's very like nonsensical, kind of in every way, she has this great line where she says, you know, yeah, maybe the Eye of Ugin mattered before, but when things are so fucked up, there isn't a center. There isn't a place you can go where things are right. So, like, if this is mirroring Jace and his experience, it's like, okay, you've been emotionally, physically, possibly, I don't even know, like, abused, manipulated, mistreated. Your memories have been stolen.
Multiple
all kinds
times.
of things. Yeah. You are this cacophony of a mess. So it's kind of like a way of saying that he needs to find his center. Because right now he doesn't have one.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense for it to be in this story, because he's sitting there saying, I want to help. I want to fix this mess that I've made. But if he is also a mess and he doesn't have that center to go to, then how can he fix it?
Sure.
right? So
fix yourself before you try to fix others and all
Yeah.
that. Sure. Well, and it's interesting too appropriately that you bring up the Liliana situation, because that line in and of itself is one thing, but then Liliana gets brought up in this story. I mean, it's by Jace kind of mentally, and then not by name, but out loud to Ugin, he brings her up because Ugin mentions Soren. Which, it's funny, I have no context or memory of whether or not at the time that this story came out, whether we knew that the next plane we were going to after this was Zendikar or Innistrad or not. I'm relatively certain we would have known by this point, but I don't know for certain. And if we did, then this is that's why we go there. And if not, then this is the, holy crap, are we going back to Innistrad? Like, you know, like, it's, so either way, that works out perfectly. That's really cool. But Ugin is the one that brings up Soren. Jace brings up Lily and says, you know, I have an ally there as well. And Ugin's like, well, go there and find Soren, my ally, because, you know, he can get distracted about things that, you know, that he cares more about than this, and he shouldn't.
Which is literally everything else.
But he shouldn't. This should be more important to him. It's just not. And so, you know, and then Nahiri gets brought up as well, and
Yeah. She should be here, and something must have happened to her. Yeah. Maybe you should have fucking checked on that, dickbag.
And we, as readers at this point in the story, shouldn't know what's happened to her yet.
Right.
We will find out later. But yeah, we don't exactly know where she is. So that is supposed to be kind of a big mystery.
Right.
There was another note though with Zada.
It's upsetting. Like,
go ahead.
it seems like he just fucking showed up here.
Ugin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, he hasn't been here for a length of time.
Well, that's the...
Yet he could have been looking for fucking Nahiri prior to that.
Well, so, interesting thing, right? The Eldrazi come...
Maybe he showed up and then realized she was gone? But why would he... Why wouldn't... Well, no, I guess...
Don't forget, he was dead.
Yes, I know.
So he said to Jace, right? Because Jace gets to a point where he finds out how long Ugin's been gone. Because Jace is like, you know, oh, well, Ulamog's going to Seagate. And Ugin's like, what's Seagate? Jace is like, are you new? Like, what the hell? Seagate's like the biggest city on the plane. Like, have you been around? No, Ugin hasn't been around. And Ugin's response is like, I've been tied up now, or whatever. Like, and at this point, I don't think we know, except we know that Ugin's a spirit dragon, so like, spirit, dead, whatever, resurrection, but we don't know that, like, how Ugin's dead at this point, or is this? No, we do. This is prior to Tarkir, or post-Tarkir, I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, because we didn't review the Tarkir stories, so Tarkir did occur before this, so this is post-Ugin being brought back to life. And this is like the next set or two sets after that. So, yeah, this is Ugin comes back to life and goes to Zendikar. You know, he's probably checking on a lot of his like schemes or whatever that he has going on in the background. And he goes to Zendikar, realizes that the eye is messed up, Nahiri's gone, Soren's not there. What the hell's happening? The Eldrazi are everywhere. You know, so yeah, maybe that's what's happening at this point, is that he only just showed up.
Yeah. I guess. It seems like he didn't just show up. Like, and maybe that's because he's going to this location of a bunch of Hedrons that he made this. So maybe when he goes back there, even though it's been fucking forever, he just like slides right back into thinking about it the same way he did before, and so it seems like he's been there a while.
Maybe, yeah.
But it feels like we show up and Ugin's there, and Ugin like has been there for a while. A short while, perhaps, but a while. But it's weird to think that like he would go, realize that Nahiri's not around, and then just stay there. But then he like said to Jace that he couldn't leave or whatever.
He said he needed to stay at the Eye because he needed to fix the Eye as the center of the network, and then he was going to have Jace go out and reform the network at least enough to surround Ulamog so that Ulamog could be re-trapped there.
Yeah, but
right?
he also wants Jace to go find Nahiri. He also wants Jace to go find Soren. Like, if you needed to find these people in order to fix the eye, then don't stay there to fix the eye. Find the people and then fix the eye.
Well, that's what Jace says to him, right? So Jace says, what can I do to help? And Ugin's like, well, go get my friends. And Jace's like, no, I'm staying here with my friends. Yeah. What can I... Excuse me. Wow. Saliva doesn't go in your lungs. Jace says, all right, I'm staying here because I have friends here. What can I do here? And that's when Ugin says, fine, trap Ulamog. So it's not that, Ugin gave instructions, but Jace gave boundaries, right? Like, he set expectations of, like, I'm not doing that. Cool, thanks, great, appreciate the info. Not doing that one, give me something else. And instead of Ugin being like, no, screw you, I gave you something to do, go do it, damn it. He's like, all right, fine, now do this instead. And Jace is okay with that one. So that's something, I guess, that direction he takes.
It seems stupid that Ugin's just kind of like sitting there going, I had to fix this. But I'll just wait for some random person to wander in here so that I can make them do things for me. Like, just go do it.
Maybe.
It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, I guess if the immediacy of... this is my guess, right? I don't know. But my assumption is the immediacy of Ulamog's presence to Seagate means that if Ugin is going along with Jace's like, hey, let's save the large contingent of the remaining populace, Ugin's like, okay, well then I have to stay here and fix this. I can't just leave to go get Soren and Nahiri, because by the time I get back, Ulamog will have killed everybody, and then we'll be able to stop him.
Yes, but that doesn't make sense either, because he blatantly says that he doesn't care about the populace of Zendikar. He cares about the multiverse as a whole.
Sure, but if he knows that Jace does, and Jace is going to trap Ulamog, then Ugin can go get Soren and Nahiri, come back, because Kozilek isn't here yet.
I understand,
Spoilers.
But like, you show up and nobody's there.
Right, and so you
like,
fix the thing that you can fix.
I get the whole, okay, like, I have to stay here and let somebody else call 911 kind of thing.
It's important.
But, like...
That's how that works.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because why would he assume that somebody would show up? Maybe he just was doing a Nahiri thing. He thought that Soren and Nahiri would show up because he got there, saw the disarray, and was like, oh, okay, so these two are going to show up any minute now, and they just never came.
Or maybe he was planning on fixing the eye, trying to trap Ulamog, and then going to get the other two.
What's the point of that?
Because then you stop Ulamog. Like, if Ulamog eats everything on this plane, then it's going to leave. So if you're trying to trap it, hurry up and trap it, and then go get the other people to help you trap everybody else. And make sure that the network is realigned so that they stay hidden.
If you need help being able to trap him and actually finish the job of trapping him, which is really the only reason why he would need Nahiri and Soren there, to help him finish the job of trapping them.
Okay.
And, like, re-solidify them or whatever. The, like, stone things that they made them into or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, then go and get them before you start. Not try to capture them and then hope that, well, they'll stay in the bonds, the temporary bonds, well enough while I'm gone. Like...
Okay. I don't know enough of how all this works, but as always, we would love to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with Amy? Do you think it's different? Do you agree with me? Although I don't know that I made strong points, but whatever. Whatever you feel, we would love to hear your thoughts as well. I have no idea. I have no idea at all. I wanted to say I thought it was interesting with Zada, and actually I thought you made a point. It had nothing to do with me. I just wrote it down. It's something that you brought up when Zada made that funny line of, don't go in there, bad magic, good luck, certain death, bye. You mentioned that Zada said bad magic.
Yeah, I thought that was a little weird. I feel like we've been somewhat conditioned to believe that, like, Bolus is evil and Ugin is good. And I feel like that's much more black and white than the reality of it.
Well, sure. I mean, and when you think about it, I mean, it's a giant dragon. So, like, that's not really a thing on Zendikar. In fact, I don't know that I'm aware of any dragons on Zendikar. So, for Zada, maybe a giant glowing dragon inside of this mountain is scary to Zada by default because it's a giant goddamn dragon.
Okay, but Ugin's not normally there.
Sure, but Zada didn't say, there's always bad magic in there. Zada said, we don't go in there, there's bad magic in there. So, like you said, who knows how long Ugin's been there? So if Zada and the goblins know Ugin's there, then they know, nope, there's a big old dragon in there. That's certain death. I ain't going anywhere near that. Bye. Good luck. If that's where you're going, congrats, I guess.
I just thought it was interesting that she referred to it as bad magic. Because, like I said, I feel like we're kind of conditioned to think of Ugin as being good. And I kind of never really felt that way.
Well.
And it's interesting because, like, she doesn't say, like, dangerous. She doesn't say,
wild
like,
or something.
She doesn't say, like, dark magic. She says bad magic.
And it's interesting that you say that, like, you don't necessarily agree with the Ugin good, Bolus bad thing. Because, one, those stories, Core 2019 stories? I think that was what it was. We reviewed them. They're here on the channel somewhere. But I think it was Core 2019. But the stories that focused on Bolus and Ugin as twins and brothers and whatever, those stories led you to believe that Ugin was the one telling these stories. Here's how you hear them. This is how you see them. And then we had that mind-blown story of Bolus telling his story and being so far off from what we knew the story to be. And then you sit there going, holy crap. Every other story that we've heard has been from Ugin's perspective and or like, it was Ugin's story passed down from generation to generation. And so who the hell knows if Ugin's story is believable? Like, Bolus's is blatantly not because we all know Bolus. But they did a really good job of being like, you know, you may not believe Bolus's story, but that should also mean you shouldn't believe Ugin's either. Fully, of course.
You know, something that you like to say is that there's three perspectives of something, you know, this person's perspective, and then the truth. You know, because no one sees things the way that they truly are.
And I mean, how many times in my life have you and I
you know, conditions affect your perception.
How many times have you and I had the conversation where I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure it was this, and then we look something up or you prove it to me one way or another that I'm like fully wrong, and I'm like, holy crap, I swore it was this thing. Like, I was there, I saw it, I remember it this way, and then you're just proven wrong, and you're like, what? I swore it was okay, and like, because it's proven to you. And so all the other situations where you can't have proof, like it's just something that you remember, but there's no audio or visual log of something, you just have to go by your memories. But your memories are not perfect. Nobody's are. Well, not nobody's, but there's like eidetic memories or whatever they're called. But still, like, that is a crazy thing to think about, is that, like, you know, even stories that you've heard from other people, how much of it was true, how much of it is false, and how much of it is false because that makes it a better story, or the truth is embarrassing for them, and how much of it is truly because they don't remember. Who knows, right? Like, it makes, well, I'm going to not tell this part of the story because it makes me look bad. Well, now you haven't given the full context for the story.
Well, and so that there's that done consciously, and there's that done unconsciously as well.
And whether you just misremember.
Your insecurities have made you remember it differently.
Yeah, because
so you're not lying, you're telling the truth, it's just wrong.
Yeah. And so, because of that, I find it interesting. You know, again, this story ties into so many other things that these authors did, which, you know, I'll gush about that more at the end. But
yes.
I'll gush about that more at the end. But Jace confronts Ugin here and at a point gets kind of confrontational, you know, like this is a giant, what used to be ancient planeswalker, right? I mean, he's still an ancient planeswalker, but he was a pre-mending, like godlike planeswalker, and now he's just a planeswalker like everybody else, although super old and powerful because he's learned things over millennia or ages, as he said. And Jace confronts him. Jace, like, Ugin's got illusions up and he's showing Jace things, and Jace is like, all right, this is enough. And he just dispels all the illusions. He puts up illusions of his own, and he's like, what about this, smart guy? What do you think of this? And Ugin's like, you have no idea what the hell you're doing. Right. Dispels all those illusions, morphs them into his own, whatever he wants to do, because Jace is like a baby, like kicking an adult's leg. Like, sure, it's annoying, but it's not going to hurt. Like, what are you doing?
But the point is that it's not like that. That's how Bolas feels about it.
Ugin.
Or that's how Ugin feels about it. But Jace isn't doing that. What he's doing is saying, like, just because your, like, overarching big picture, look at things is important doesn't mean that the minutia is not important.
Sure, and yeah, and so, but I just think I found it interesting because it correlates so interestingly with Jace / Vraska and Azor from Ixalan. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same situation, except that Azor doesn't have his spark anymore. Mm-hmm. That's part one. And part two, Jace is the more complete version of himself, having gained his memories from his time with Alhammarret back, which at this time of this story, he doesn't have.
Yeah.
So he comes across Azor, another ancient planeswalker, but a desparked one, and like child's play, just shuts him the hell down.
Yeah.
And it truly is, and I mean, again, Azor was working with Ugin on this whole, like, let's deal with Bolas situation and trap him on Ixalan or whatever. So that was great. Because this, or that moment with Jace and Azor, should hearken you back to this moment and this confrontation with Ugin. And Kelly Diggs, who wrote this story, was still writing at the time of Ixalan, or at least was helping Allison with her writing, right? They were part of the writing team at the time that those Ixalan stories were coming out, and
this team was had dwindled to basically just them at that point.
It was the two of them plus an editor and like one or two other people, yes. I don't recall their names and I apologize for that, but yes.
At the moment.
Right, we talked about it at the time in those reviews, and you should definitely go check those out as well. But that harkens back to this, because it's such a, I mean, think about how long from one to the other these stories were. I mean, this was back in 2014 or something, 2015 maybe, and the Ixalan stories were 2018, 2017, like 2-3 years later. Super well done. Super well done. Something else you wanted to talk about, Jace kind of gathers up some mana to be able to do all these illusions and stuff. And you mentioned the line is Jace gathering mana. I didn't quote this, but I'll paraphrase. Jace was gathering mana like a rush of knowledge and a deep, cool current.
Yeah, and I loved that wording because it just reminded me of Nissa's stream. So when we fast forward, I'll point backwards when I'm saying flash forward, because the story that we're talking about now is prior to the story I'm about to talk about.
Correct.
Stories of Yahenni interacting with Nissa, when Yahenni learns that Nissa's becoming part blue, and refers to it as, like, refers to her energy as being, as having acquired this new aspect of it that is like a stream, a flowing stream. Or I can't remember the exact wording.
Sure, it's been a little bit.
It was definitely a stream.
Yeah.
But I don't know like what the adjective was there.
Whether it was like flowing or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was yeah.
Or calm or something like that. But it was this sort of really nice moment for Yahenni to kind of like see her in a way that other people had never seen her. And we kind of got to see her almost through Yahenni's eyes at that point a little bit. And I just really liked how that wording kind of mirrored very perfectly that wording here.
Well, and again, it's almost like they planned ahead.
Yeah.
You know, it's super well done. So well done.
Yeah, and we'll reference that same sort of thing again later.
Of course.
As we talk more about this
Hell
story.
yeah. So then like I said, we get to that moment of like Jace and Ugin being confrontational with one another, because the story even says, you know, Jace realizes that Ugin also is getting to the point where he's realizing these two may not be on the same side, right? And they're not fully against one another, because it's not like one is working with the Eldrazi and the other one isn't.
Right.
But it's also like Jace is like, no, I'm here with my friends. We're here to kill them. So if you're not, then we're not fully simpatico here, my friend. Like, we need to figure out what the hell's going on. And
yeah, but then Ugin just needed to convince Jace like of what actually made sense there.
And that's not Ugin's way, because Ugin is instead spending the time telling Jace, you're assuming things again, and being like super vague in his explanations of things. And Jace, being Jace, is just getting frustrated. He's like, just tell me.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Like, what is it that you mean here? Because you're saying things, but I don't understand what you're saying. And if I don't understand what you're saying, then I can't do anything about it.
Which is interesting, because Jace is a person who likes puzzles. I mean, that's the whole reason why he's here, is because this is a puzzle to be solved. He's the guy to do it, and that's great. But it's still that situation where, well, my assumption, I guess, is it's the situation where it's like, I don't have time for this. Hurry up and tell me what I need to know so that I can go and help my friends, because you may not care about them, but I do.
Right.
And so I need to go now, so tell me what's happening. And we get something that I, to this day, before we went back and read this story, I still remembered vividly the analogy that Ulamog used to describe the Eldrazi to Jace. Perfectly, I remembered it. So good, because the analogy that's used, again, it's Ugin being vague, but at the same time conveying his message kind of perfectly.
Yeah, but it took him a while to get there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But describing, so Jace is trying to figure out, like, I'm going to kill Ulamog. And Ugin says, well, that's not going to work. You need to trap him. And Jace is like, well, whatever. Trap him, kill him, who cares? We're going to do one of them. And Ugin's like, no, you're going to trap him, because that is not Ulamog. Or at least that's not all of Ulamog. And Jace is like, what do you mean? Like, they're from the Blind Eternities, but they're here. So, sure, you don't want them to run back to the Blind Eternities, because Ugin at one point says, like, I don't care, like, paraphrasing again, it's not about this plane, it's about the multiverse. So, if I can stop them here, trap them here, great. But if you hurt them, and they run away from here, they're going somewhere else. And that's even a bigger problem. So, we need to hold them here. I'm fixing the eye now. You can go make sure that there is a circle of hedrons around Ulamog. Trap him, stop him, whatever you have to do.
I just want to backtrack for a second.
Sure, I'm sorry.
You mentioned that, like, Jace likes puzzles.
Yes.
And so it's a little bit weird that, like, he felt such an immediacy to, like, try and get to the point of what Ugin is saying.
Right.
And you know, your theory of it being, like, this is fucking important, let's
Yeah,
get
we don't
on
have
with it.
time for this, sure.
Makes perfect sense. But I'll kind of say my theory is more along the lines of, like, that puzzles are intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
And Ugin is wise. Ugin is old. Ugin knows a lot of shit, but it's not logic-based shit. It's based on, like, the stuff that he's been able to do, and he has amazing, vast power, and the way that things used to be, right? And so I kind of feel like it's almost more like the way that Jace thinks is so intellectual, but it's not wise like the way Ugin thinks.
Sure.
And so he can't understand Ugin saying things in that vague way and, like, know what that means. So, but I do agree that the way that Ugin was able to actually, like, convey that to him once they kind of, like, met each other halfway.
Sure. Or more like 3/4 and a quarter, I feel like.
Okay, yeah. In the explanation of this.
Yeah.
You know, but once Ugin, like, figured out how to explain it in a way where Jace could understand it, it fixed everything, right?
Yeah. Because, again, the explanation is just so good.
Yeah.
So, the explanation that we're given is that Ulamog, as he is on the plane, is a hand in a pond. And Jace and the other members of the plane of Zendikar, who are seeing Ulamog, are like the fish inside of that pond. When you see a giant hand come through, you think, oh my god, that's a 5-headed monster. And the fingernail, or the hangnail, is its eye. Because you have no other context, excuse me, for that thing than what you're seeing of it in that moment.
Right.
So to you, what you see is what it is. But it's not. And so if you poke its eye out, you've cut its hangnail off. Who cares? If you hurt it or kill it, what you see, you've cut its hand off. Which is going to suck for that thing, but it's definitely not dead at all.
Right.
And if it wants to put its other hand in, now there's another monster. And so Ugin says, and so what if, so Jace is trying to figure out what, that's the Titan. The Titan is a hand. And Jace is like, okay, but what about the brood? What about all the little things running around that we're killing? I mean, that's got to be helping something. And Ugin says, okay, let's go back to our analogy. If the Eldrazi is a man and Ulamog is a hand, what if that man isn't a man? What if it's a being with 100 hands? What about 1,000,000? And so now all the little Eldrazi brood are fingers of hundreds of hands. And Jace is like, are you telling me that every time we kill one of these things, it does nothing to stop the greater threat? It just stops that one thing from killing you? And Ugin's like, I mean, yeah, basically. Brilliant. It's so well put. It's so good. And so Ugin says if you trap the Eldrazi here with the Hedrons, instead of killing them, because what Ugin says is don't kill Ulamog. You kill Ulamog, all you do is cut its hand off. Now, what's it going to do, this man? It's going to pull its hand out of the pond. Because you've cut off its hand. It's going to pull its nub
go
out.
to a different pond.
Yeah. So Ugin says instead, drive a spike through the hand. Pin it to the wall here in the pond. So that it's now not bothering anyone in the pond anymore, but it's also, as Amy correctly...
controlling it.
Right, but as Amy correctly put it, it's also not leaving and going to another pond, or the body that's outside of the hand is not walking away and going to another pond because it's trapped in this pond.
This
right
person's stuck here now because there's a spike through their hand.
Super well done. Super well done. And Ugin, I don't remember whether it was Ugin or Jace, it might have been Jace, but who says, yes, if a spike is through the hand, oh yeah, because Jace brings up like, well, the Hedrons have power in them, because he learns it from Zada, who's the Hedron grinder. And so Jace says, the Hedrons have power in them, just use the power within the Hedrons, not just to hold them, but to pull them further in.
Yeah.
So Ugin's like, yeah, you can pull the man into the pond, but think about it. If it's like a small pond, like Ugin didn't say this, but like if it's a small pond and you pull a man into it, you just knock all the water out of the pond and then it's not a pond anymore. It's just a human body inside of a pond and all the fish are crushed inside of it. So like, that's not a great idea, but Jace's point is we could pull the man into the pond and then kill him, because Jace's rationale is, this thing is here, I want it dead, I'm gonna kill it. My friends and I are gonna kill it. And Ugin's like...
Well, I think his rationale is trapping them didn't work.
Correct.
Because we set him free inadvertently, and now this is happening.
Right, so obviously that plan wasn't good enough, Ugin, because we accidentally set them free. We weren't even trying to, although Ugin's point is well-founded with, sure, you didn't mean...
trying to.
Right, you didn't mean to set them free, but someone did. But Jace's other point is, so you didn't assume that anyone would want these things to be out, but they are now, so someone obviously did. And again, that's kind of when Ugin is like, you're assuming again, you have no idea whether, like, if we trap them, whether Bolus will release them again, or whether releasing them the first time, whatever he was trying to do with that, he's now already done.
Right, he's already, like, set that plan in motion to a point where setting them free again would be irrelevant.
Right. So, who knows who's to say, but, and I guess we wouldn't know, but I think Ugin's point is, what Bolus was likely trying to do at that point was just to get them to focus on the Eldrazi and not focus on what Bolus is doing, which is fair.
Clever distraction.
He's kind of busy doing some stuff.
Right. Which we know because we read the fast forward stories.
Yeah. But, so, Ugin says to Jace, don't kill Ulamog, because if you injure him, as Amy put it, he goes away and goes to another pond, he goes to another plane, it's a bad time. It's a bad idea.
He destroys that one as well.
But to me, this is how good these authors are. Because I'm sitting here now, right, when we read Zendikar Rising stories, one of the things that I asked, and that I think by the time we got to the final story, you came around on it a little bit more.
Yes.
But one of the things that I asked was, did this story need to be told, or was it a company saying, we're going to return to Zendikar because it sells product, make a story about it? And then you just have to like come up with a story. And so they're like, well, there are Skyclaves. We haven't ever seen them before, but they were always there. And so there are groups that explore those Skyclaves. There are parties, and there's a party mechanic. So like that's the type of design that they use. But our question was, did those stories need to exist, or did they feel forced?
Right. Like, was it really true to this, or was it sort of manufactured pieces creating a whole that wasn't really cohesive?
Because think about what we just talked about with this one story alone. We talked about how it relates to the next set Innistrad that they go to. We talked about how it relates to Innistrad that they go to. How it could possibly relate to like Amonkhet, or it relates to Kaladesh, like Amy talked about with Yeheni. There are so many threads that this connects to other stories
I still have another one to say.
Good. But that they wanted to write.
Right.
And so that's why I asked with those Zendikar Rising stories, did they need to be written? And they were, even in this story alone, they were setting themselves up, I think, for a future story possibility.
Yes.
But I want you to be able to get to your point of the next
I mean,
thing.
I think the older stories by the older authors were an elaborate hedron network of stories.
Sure.
And they were not a mess without a center.
Sure.
They were a perfect hedron network. And all the newer stories fed off of the older ones. in a very, what's the word?
Cohesive?
No. What's the word?
I hope I have this answer.
Like when they hired somebody for Dominaria to try and make sure that things were actually accurate to the stories.
Jesus.
It's
Continuity manager.
Yes. Continuity was perfect. Because all the stories that hadn't even been written yet, or barely even conceived in someone's mind, just plopped right into their designated spot in the way that the network made it do.
And I mean I think it's sure, but I think it's so many different things, because I think that who knows at this point, right? We all know at this point, or many people know at this point, that Wizards of the Coast makes their products years in advance, which is why when there are issues with a particular set, like I can't believe that Throne of Eldraine was so broken. Well, we're going to have to wait a little while until we can get sets that are not as broken. So we get the Omnaths of the world even following the Okos of the world and the Uros of the world, and etc. And so because of that, and I'm not trying to get into a big discussion of like broken standard, that's a whole different show that we don't do, and that other content creators that are much more other content creators that are much more prevalent than we are have absolutely done it, and go check them out instead. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm getting at is, because Wizards does things so far in advance, it makes sense that you would have your story team not just sitting down and saying, let's write the Battle for Zendikar stories. They're going to sit down and say, what are our stories going forward?
Right.
We're going to Innistrad next. Why? Then we're going to this place after that. Why? There's this new plane, Amonkhet. What's going on there? What's its connection to Nicol Bolas? Why are we going there?
And then how can we make sure that all of those tie in together to make sense that either these two separate things are happening at the same time, or they're happening at separate times, but it makes sense that they're all happening.
Yeah. And so I think, because there are a multitude of people out there in this Vorthos community who are trying to understand why even the well-written stories that we're getting today, Zendikar Rising, Kaldheim, etc., still feel not like these.
Lacking.
And I think it's because you're bringing in individuals one at a time and having them write individual stories. Thing. If you try to do a cohesive thing, which they may, granted, we are doing this.
It might be like starting there and then.
We are saying this in between Kaldheim and Strixhaven. So there is something going on with the Phyrexians. We don't know what it is yet at the time of recording. So it is possible that they have started doing that again. And I'm not saying that they aren't, and I'm not saying that they won't ever again, but I'm saying that in the lead up to right now, it feels like they had not been doing that with the more recent stories of this point where we are in 2021. And that these stories are so beloved, yes, because they have an in-house story team. And that's what people have been crying out for, to return, because that was the best time in Magic story, as many people will agree. Right. And I don't know that I disagree with that statement. But this is why it was good, because the story team or the writers absolutely had to have sat down and made this continuity work so well together. And so, for example, this story, or the main point that I was trying to get to, this story is so well done because, I guess, spoilers, if you're unaware of how Oath of the Gatewatch ends, maybe you want to just end the video here and thanks, we'll see you next week. Because if you want to just stay with us to find out how it ends, that's totally cool. We appreciate that. I'm gonna spoil it now. So, like I said, tune out now, your last warning. But this is the story that could have given them an out if and when they themselves, these authors, wanted to come back to Zendikar. Or, in general, come back to the Kozilek Ulamog based Eldrazi stories. Emrakul we know in the next set, Innistrad, not the next set Strixhaven, but the next set following these stories. Innistrad, we know Emrakul ends up in the moon, that's where she is to this day, 2021, but Ulamog and Kozilek, as far as we all know, are dead. But this story is the one that they could have pointed back to and had Ugin look at Jace and say, I warned you. You pulled the man into the pond and you killed them. But you didn't.
Right.
And they're still out there. You hurt them. They're licking their wounds. But now when they show up on Fiora or Dominaria or whatever, Jace doesn't get to be surprised Pikachu gif. Why are they here? Ugin can turn around and say, I told you not to kill them. And you decided to kill them anyway because you think you know better. But you obviously don't, and here they are again. Because they weren't dead. Who knows if they can regenerate?
Right.
Who knows
and
if...
Here they are again on a plane that doesn't have hedrons that can trap them.
Well, right, because Ugin made the hedrons with the help of Nahiri, and who knows if they can ever come together that way ever again.
Right.
Or, I mean, to be fair, they were very likely... that was very likely because they were pre-mending planeswalkers. Who knows if post-mending they could even do that again.
Right.
So, that is brilliant. Because even if they weren't planning so far ahead to say, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do this, and then we'll go back to Zendikar, and the Eldrazi will be there. Or, then we'll go to this new plane that nobody's ever heard of before, and the Eldrazi will be there, and Jace will have to work with Ugin to try to figure out why they're there. Oh, right, because you did what Ugin expressly told you not to do, and this is the result of that. But it still leaves that story open to them so that you could look back at the story and go, holy crap, they knew all the way back then that this was going to be happening? I mean, not technically, but they left the door open for themselves. Whereas when you read Zendikar Rising and you read about these skyclaves, you're like, the hell is a skyclave? How have we never heard of a skyclave before? They're just in the sky? Why would they not have told us about them before now? They just made them up because they needed a new thing for the new stories. And so it's...
I'm pretty sure we had heard of them before.
I'm relatively certain they're literally a brand new thing that were only introduced in Zendikar Rising.
Or no, I thought that there was like one skyclave. That Nahiri interacted with. I don't remember.
I don't know.
But the point is that it's not memorable, and so they kind of pulled it out of their butt, even if they didn't.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. So that's the world we live in today, is you get stories manufactured of like, it was always here. You didn't know that? Well, don't worry about it. It was always here.
Right.
Versus stories that were left open-ended on purpose, but in a hidden way. Mm-hmm. Because it's been years now. So at this point in 2021, you could absolutely say to me, nope, Ulamog and Kozilek are fully dead, they're never coming back. Okay, then that story where they are killed is how they are killed. Cool, makes perfect sense, they're dead, I get it.
Yeah.
But if you turned around and had them come back and had Ugin do that explanation of, they're not dead, I told you not to try to pull the man in because you pulled the man in, but on the bottom of the man's feet were other feet connected to another man. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Who the hell knows how far that analogy can go, but you think you have the whole thing, you kill it, that's not all of it. And now it's licking its wounds in the blind eternities for years, and then comes back stronger than ever, smarter, whatever you want to say to make it a bigger threat, they could absolutely do that. And so this is why the authors are just so good in leaving that open for themselves so that in the future they could come back and just go right back into their amazing writing again and keep writing about these villainous characters. Give them more depth, give them less depth, who cares, but be able to still have them as characters to write about if they wanted to. They clearly wanted to do it with Emrakul, because Emrakul is definitively not gone. Whereas these other two could be, Emrakul definitely is not and could come back at any given point.
And she got such an elaborate story. And that's really what I wanted to refer to when I said, that I wanted to talk about this metaphor
Please.
again.
Yeah, because I think I know where you're
I
going.
wanted to talk to about the Emrakul stories.
Please.
And how incredible they were, and how the metaphor used there was a person playing chess. And the Zendikari people were essentially the chess pieces, while Emrakul was the hand that moves. That's another hand metaphor.
It's really good.
So it's a perfect mirror to this.
It's so good.
This sort of, my perspective is this: I live on this chessboard and I move only certain directions, and I do certain things, and I live here, and this is a great place to live, and all my friends are, on either side of me, and, we protect the king and the queen, but in reality, it's a game.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a game.
And you're pawns in that game, right?
And you're just being controlled by the guy who's bigger than you. And that guy's being controlled by the guy who's bigger than him. Mm-hmm. And these planeswalkers think they're so powerful, but they're just being controlled by the guy who's bigger than them. The Eldrazi, Nicol Bolas, Ugin,
the Phyrexians, whatever
the
it happens to be.
Phyrexians.
Sure.
The point is, the blind eternities exist because there's always another guy that's bigger than you. And one that's bigger than him, and one that's bigger than him.
It's very...
It never ends.
It's very like endings of Men in Black movies, right? Where in the movie they open a locker and there's a whole world of people in the locker. And then at the end of the movie they kick open a door and they're inside of a locker in a gym full of giant aliens, right? It's the same idea. Like
Here's a who.
There's a universe inside of a gem on a cat's necklace.
Right, yeah.
And there's a universe in there because it's the whole idea of, we are this to something else.
Right.
We are the speck from Horton Hears a Who. That's a great analogy as well. I like that. So yeah, and it's funny, I thought of that as well, but of course Amy would be the one to bring up the hand that moves. It's literally her favorite story, and that's not a complaint at all. That's great. So yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. I'm sure there's more that we're missing because of how good this was. There may be other stories that we're just missing entirely, like other Easter eggs or hints to other stories in the future or callbacks from other stories, whatever it happens to be.
If you guys went and read the story before watching this video and you feel like there's stuff that we missed, please leave it in the comments because we really want to know.
Right, or if you liked this so much that you then went to go read it if you haven't already. Either way, come let us know. Come join in the conversation because finding these Easter eggs, recalling other stories that they're related to, maybe going and watching other JaARs where we talked about those stories and leaving comments on those, all of that, because that part's a little self-referential, but still, whatever it happens to be, it allows you to join in the discussion with us as we all show off our...
#Vorthos Pride.
That's right. So, thank you all so very much for watching. We will be back next week with the next episode of JaAR.
Yes.
We would love any thoughts that you have on this story, on our analysis, what have you, on the current state of things. Do you agree with my analysis that this is why these stories are better? Because there was that continuity, as opposed to you bring somebody in, you tell them what to write, they leave, and then the next person comes in and only has so much time to read other stories to know what they're meant to be focused on. Are you reading just the previous story to find out what's going on in this world? Are they reading the last story with a particular planeswalker that's in here? How does that work?
You're essentially starting from scratch, and the thing that makes analyzing these stories so cool is that you can. It's difficult to analyze the newer stories because
they're not building off of as much as we are.
Exactly, they're not building off of anything.
Mm-hmm.
They're starting at square one again.
Mm-hmm. And again, maybe they read like a set's worth of stories, because the authors have their own lives outside of writing these stories.
So it's not square one, it's square 5.
Well, right, but regardless, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you.
But we're at square 50.
Right, right, and I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just that, there's only so much time, and we talked about this with Martha Wells way back in the day.
Yeah.
Way back. And again, that's not her fault either. That was just the new set of stories and how it was working, but there was only a finite set of stories that were being read by her, because she has a life outside of writing these stories, because that's not her main job. Yeah. How dare she? Yeah. So anyway, that's getting into a whole other thing. But I would love to hear people's thoughts on any and all of that analysis, any of those thoughts. That's what the comment section is for. You can check us out on our socials down in the description box below. Don't forget to read the story, top link in the description, that's what it's for. But check the whole links, all of them. We have other channels, etc. In fact, this coming Wednesday, if you're watching this live, will be our final episode of Super Mario 64, our full 120-star playthrough. So if you've missed any of those, head on over to Video Games for All, link in the description, to check that out. That is super.
It's a lot, guys.
It sure was. So I encourage you to go check that stuff out. And then, will there be another series following that one on Wednesday? Spoilers, yes. What will it be? I don't know. Maybe you should tune into our streams.
Yes.
Mondays and Fridays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm usually a lot more loose-lipped about those things in the streams, so you should come out and ask me about it. I would be more than happy to tell you, and even if nobody asks, I'll probably spill the beans at some point about what that new series is going to be, but whatever it happens to be, we hope you enjoy everything that comes out on this channel, on Video Games for All, on Gluten Free for All, on anything and everything that we do here on this Geek for All family of channels. And so from us here, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
Thank you all so very much for watching, and as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody!